My husband kept 40 sets of clean guest linens behind a locked glass door. The night sewage water soaked our bedroom, he told me none of them were for us. Not because we had guests, not because the inn was full. It was the quiet season, and every room upstairs was empty. He said no because he had made a rule. The linens in the west cabinet were emergency inventory. Once a bundle was sealed, it stayed sealed until there was a real emergency. I stood in the hallway in wet socks, holding the corner of our ruined comforter away from my clothes, and looked through the glass at row after row of white cotton wrapped in brown paper. I think the drain backing into our bedroom counts, I said. Graham did not even look at the floor behind me. It is contained, he said. That is not the same thing. Then he took the little brass key from the lock and put it in his pocket. There are moments when a marriage breaks loudly. A confession. A slammed door. A suitcase dropped beside the stairs. Mine changed shape to the sound of one small key touching the coins in my husband's pocket. The inn had been Graham's idea, but the building had been mine. My Aunt Ruth left it to me 4 years earlier. In her lifetime, it was called Marigold House, though there had not been a marigold in the garden since the summer I turned 12. It sat 2 streets back from the coast, a square gray building with 6 upstairs rooms, crooked chimneys, and windows that complained whenever the wind came in from the water. Aunt Ruth rented rooms to summer visitors until her knees made the stairs impossible. After that, she lived mostly in the kitchen, surrounded by old reservation books and postcards from people who still remembered the blackberry cake she served on Sundays. When she died, everyone assumed I would sell. I assumed it too. At the time, I was 32 and newly divorced. I had a job entering invoices for a medical supply company, a rented studio with 1 chair, and a habit of apologizing before asking anyone for anything. My former husband had spent 8 years explaining that I was careless, emotional, impractical, and fortunate that he was willing to manage the difficult parts of life. By the time I left him, I could not order dinner without wondering if I had chosen incorrectly. Graham met me 6 months later at the estate sale. He bought a brass luggage cart that was too large for his apartment and stayed afterward to help me move 3 warped bookcases away from a leaking window. He was methodical without being cold. He carried a pencil behind one ear. He could look at a room full of broken furniture and immediately see categories instead of chaos. When I told him I planned to sell Marigold House, he walked through it once and asked why. Because I cannot run an inn. Have you ever tried? No. Then you do not know that. It was the kindest challenge anyone had given me in years. He did not say I was secretly gifted. He did not promise it would be easy. He simply treated my fear as missing information instead of a verdict. Over the next year, he helped me find the information. He taught me how to compare contractor estimates. He showed me how to build a maintenance calendar. He stood beside me when a roofer tried to double an agreed price and calmly asked for every change in writing. He made me practice saying, "I need time to review that," until I could do it without smiling apologetically. When I passed the local hospitality inspection, Graham brought home a tiny cake with, "You did the hard part," written across it in crooked blue icing. I cried before I cut it. "You gave me my backbone back," I told him. He shook his head. "It was always yours." That sentence became sacred to me. It was one of the reasons I married him. Marigold House reopened the following spring with 4 guest rooms instead of 6. We lived in the 2 rooms at the back and used the old dining room for breakfast. I handled bookings, guests, and food. Graham kept his weekday job as a facilities coordinator and managed purchasing, maintenance, and what he called continuity. Continuity meant being ready. At first, I loved that about him. He kept spare batteries labeled by purchase month. He stored duplicate keys in numbered envelopes. Every guest room had a flashlight, a first aid pouch, and a printed card showing 2 exit routes. He bought a small generator after a storm knocked out the power for 7 hours. When a pipe froze during our second winter, he had shut-off tools in his hand before I found the plumber's number. Guests wrote reviews about how safe and cared for they felt. So did I. Then Graham created the West Cabinet. It had once displayed Aunt Ruth's china. Graham removed the shelves, reinforced the back, and installed a dehumidifier no larger than a book. Inside, he stacked sealed bundles of sheets, pillowcases, towels, bath mats, blankets, and robes. Each bundle had a date and room number written across the paper. There were enough linens to turn every room twice without washing anything. "That seems like a lot," I said when the delivery arrived. "It is a buffer." "For what?" "Boiler failure, laundry equipment failure, contamination, a storm that traps guests here, any event that interrupts normal turnover." I ran my hand over one of the brown paper packages. "We already have 3 complete sets per room. 3 is normal inventory, this is emergency inventory." He said it as if the distinction existed in nature. I laughed and told him the cabinet looked like a department store had prepared for winter. He smiled then. He liked being teased when teasing still felt like admiration. The brass key stayed in the lock. Over time, the cabinet became more than storage. It became an exhibit of Graham's foresight. He showed it to the insurance assessor. He showed it to another innkeeper who visited for breakfast. He mentioned it whenever someone complained about supply delays. "Most people prepare after a problem," he would say. "I prefer not to let the problem choose the timetable." I was proud of him. I was also grateful, which is not always the same thing. Gratitude has a clean shape when someone helps, and then steps back. It changes when the helper keeps a private ledger. The first entry appeared so quietly, I almost missed it. One afternoon, I opened a sealed bundle because a guest's toddler had been sick across 2 beds, and our laundry service had delayed its pickup. Graham found the empty paper in the utility room. "Why did you use West cabinet stock?" he asked. "We needed another set of twin sheets. You could have driven to the laundromat." It was nearly midnight. "That does not make it an emergency." It did to the family trying to put 2 tired children to bed. He stared at me for a moment, then wrote the missing bundle on a clipboard. The next morning, he ordered a replacement and moved the key from the lock to a hook inside his office. I noticed. I did not object. I told myself inventory worked better when one person tracked it. A month later, I needed 2 bath towels because the dryer belt snapped during a full weekend. Graham told me which hardware store carried belts and said he would help install one after work. "What do I give the guests now?" I asked. "There are older pool towels in the garden shed. They are faded. They are clean. There are new towels 10 feet away. Those are not operational stock." He spoke patiently, the way one explains that a fire extinguisher is not a doorstop. I fetched the faded towels. The guests did not complain. That became part of Graham's argument too. Nothing terrible happened, so his decision had been correct. He began using the phrase unnecessary depletion. A cracked pitcher did not justify opening the backup dishes. A broken hairdryer did not justify using the boxed replacement before he approved a reorder. A guest who forgot a phone charger could not borrow one from the emergency electronics drawer. Each decision was small enough to sound foolish when isolated. And each time I questioned one, Graham reminded me that systems failed when people made exceptions for convenience. "You hired me to keep this place stable," he said once. I had not hired him. We owned the business together. But by then, his salary had paid most of the renovation loan, while the inn found its footing. The deed was still in my name, yet the monthly accounts told a story in which his money had rescued my inheritance. I knew that story embarrassed him when spoken aloud, so he rarely spoke it aloud. He did not need to. It lived in every pause after I disagreed. I began to hear a second sentence beneath the first. "You hired me to keep this place stable, after everything I did to make your impossible idea work." The night the drain backed up was the first cold Thursday in November. We had no guests until Saturday. I spent the afternoon repainting the front vestibule while Graham replaced weather stripping on the kitchen door. We ate soup at the long dining table and argued pleasantly about whether Aunt Ruth's old portrait was charming or frightening. At 10, I went upstairs and smelled something sour in the back hall. Our bedroom carpet was dark around the bathroom threshold. At first, I thought the shower had overflowed. Then the toilet made a low, bubbling sound, and gray water rose through the drain. I called Graham. He moved quickly. That was the terrible gift of him. Even at his most controlling, he was competent. He shut the bathroom supply, blocked the hall with towels, called the emergency plumber, and carried the small rugs outside. I stripped the bed because water had reached the bottom edge of the comforter where it trailed near the floor. One pillow had fallen. Our clean spare sheets were in the laundry room below, waiting to be washed with the inn's regular load. By 11, the plumber had cleared the blockage and warned us not to use the upstairs fixtures until morning. A sanitation company would come at 8. We could sleep in any empty guest room. I carried our pillows toward room 4, then remembered that its linens had already been stripped for seasonal deep cleaning. So had rooms 3, 5, and 6. The clean regular stock was bundled for the laundry pickup scheduled the next day. That left the west cabinet. Through its glass doors, the white packages looked almost luminous in the dark hall. I called down to Graham for the key. He came upstairs, wiping his hands on an old towel. "What do you need?" "1 king set, 2 pillowcases, and a blanket." "For which room?" 4. He looked toward the open door of our bedroom, then back at the cabinet. "No." I waited for the rest of the sentence. It did not come. "No?" "The contamination never entered room 4. The emergency stock is not required." "We need somewhere clean to sleep." "There are clean moving blankets in the utility closet. We can put those over the mattress for 1 night." I thought he was joking. Moving blankets are thick gray pads we used under furniture. They had been across the floor of a rental truck. They were clean in the broadest possible sense, but they smelled of dust and rubber. "You want us to sleep on furniture pads while 40 sets of sheets sit here?" "Those sets are for business continuity. We are the people who run the business." "That is not what the category means." "The category." I looked at his face and understood that he was not refusing comfort because we lacked it. He was refusing because allowing the need to define the rule would weaken his right to define both. "I will replace anything we open tomorrow," I said. "That is not the point." "Then what is the point?" "I made a rule that sealed inventory remains sealed until an event threatens guest operations." "You made a rule?" "Yes. For my house. For our business. My aunt's cabinet. My aunt's building. Our bedroom is wet, there are no guests, and you are telling me I cannot use 1 set of my own sheets." His expression changed. Not much. A tightening around the eyes. A stillness in his mouth. "Do you want to compare whose property and money made this place possible?" He regretted it as soon as he said it. I could see that, but regret did not erase the map his sentence had drawn. My inheritance was a burden he had organized. His income was the structure holding it up. My judgment was an exception waiting to damage his system. I put the ruined comforter on the floor. "Give me the key." "No, I am not asking your permission." "Then why did you ask me for it?" That question landed harder than shouting would have. Because he was right. I had asked. I had stood in my own hallway and asked my husband to unlock clean bedding while dirty water cooled behind me. Somewhere between the first contractor estimate and that November night, I had confused his confidence with authority. Graham removed the key from his pocket and closed his fist around it. "If you open this cabinet every time you are uncomfortable, there is no point maintaining reserves." Every time. There had been 1 sick child, 1 broken dryer, 1 contaminated bedroom. He had turned 3 ordinary needs across 2 years into a pattern of recklessness. "I am going downstairs," I said. "What are you doing?" "Solving the problem without your cabinet." He followed me to the kitchen. I took my coat from the hook, found my car keys, and opened the back door. "It is almost midnight," he said. "The 24-hour shop by the highway sells sheets at triple the normal price." "Then I will pay triple." "That is wasteful. Sleeping on truck blankets to protect 40 untouched sets from a hypothetical future is wasteful." His voice became very calm. "You are emotional because the drain upset you. We can discuss this tomorrow." "No. You can keep the cabinet untouched tonight. I am getting clean sheets." He drove instead. Not as an apology. He took his keys from the bowl and said he did not trust me on the coastal road when I was agitated. 40 minutes later, he returned with the cheapest set the highway shop sold, a thin beige package that crackled when I opened it. He placed it on the table without looking at me. "Thank you," I said automatically. He walked away. We made the bed in room 4 together without speaking. The fitted sheet slipped off one corner twice because it was too shallow for the mattress. Graham fixed it with 2 elastic clips from his toolkit. Even in silence, he had the right tool. That used to comfort me. That night, it frightened me. The next morning, Graham spoke to the sanitation crew, labeled the damaged items, and arranged carpet removal. To anyone watching, he was attentive and efficient. He did not speak to me except to ask whether I had photographed the bathroom for insurance. At breakfast, I tried once. "Are we all right?" He buttered toast to each edge. "I am not discussing this while you are committed to misunderstanding me." "I understand you. I disagree." He set the knife down. "That is exactly what I mean." Then he carried his plate into the office and shut the door. For 2 days, he moved around me like I was a guest who had overstayed. No raised voice. No insults. No dramatic threat. He simply withdrew every ordinary sign that I belonged beside him. He answered practical questions in 1 sentence. He slept in room 4 after I returned to our cleaned bedroom. He ate before I came downstairs. When I entered a room, his attention moved to a screen. Silence can be mistaken for peace by anyone who is not required to earn its end. By Saturday, I was rehearsing apologies. "I am sorry I made it about ownership. I am sorry I questioned the inventory plan. I am sorry I was sharp when you were handling the plumbing." Each apology was partly true. That was what made them dangerous. I had made it about ownership. I had questioned him sharply. He had handled the plumbing. But none of those truths answered why his rule mattered more than my basic comfort, or why disagreement required days of exile. Our first guests arrived at 3. A retired teacher named Celia and her sister had booked room 6 for a weekend of antique shopping. Celia noticed the new beige sheets folded on the laundry counter. "Emergency replacement?" she asked. I almost laughed. "Something like that?" She held up the fitted sheet and frowned at its shallow corner. "These never stay on," she said. "I bought the same brand when my roof leaked. Spent one night waking up wrapped like a sandwich." The words were ordinary, but they loosened something in me. "What did you do?" I asked. "Opened the good set I was saving." She said it without ceremony. "What were you saving it for?" Celia smiled. "Apparently for the day I learned I was allowed to use things while I was alive." She carried her suitcase upstairs. I stood alone in the laundry room with one hand on the beige sheet. Allowed. That was the word I had been avoiding. Graham had helped me leave a marriage where every choice required defense. Then, slowly, and perhaps without ever naming it to himself, he had built a more elegant version of the same room. There were no insults this time. There were categories. No shouting. There were procedures. No one called me incapable. I was simply told that capable people followed the rules he wrote. I went to his office. He was updating the damage report. "I want to talk at 7, after the guests leave for dinner." He did not look up. "About what?" "The cabinet, the silence, and our partnership." "I told you I am not going to relitigate one set of sheets." "Then listen while I explain why it is not about the sheets." He looked at me then. His face showed fatigue, not cruelty. That mattered to me. I did not need him to become a monster before I was permitted to draw a line. "At 7, I said. He agreed. At 6:55, I put 3 things on the dining table: the brass luggage tag Graham bought at Aunt Ruth's estate sale, the clipboard from the West cabinet, a blank page from one of the old reservation books. Graham sat across from me. I began with the sentence I had practiced for years. "I need time to say this without being corrected." His eyebrows lifted, but he nodded. "You taught me to ask contractors for clarity," I said. "You taught me not to sign something because another person was impatient. You told me my fear was missing information, not a verdict. Those things changed my life, and I will always be grateful." His shoulders softened. "But gratitude is not a lifetime appointment as my decision maker." They tightened again. "I have never asked for that. You locked shared supplies because I made a choice you disliked." You refused to clean bed in a house full of clean bedding because your rule mattered more than the need in front of you. Then you stopped speaking to me until I was ready to apologize. I was preventing a fight. You were waiting to win one. That is unfair. It may feel unfair. It is still what happened. He reached for the clipboard. I placed my hand over it. The cabinet will no longer be controlled by one person. We will create a rotation schedule. Anything with an age limit or ordinary use will move through regular inventory. Either of us can open supplies for a current need and log the replacement afterward. You cannot maintain continuity through committee. We are not a committee, we are a marriage. And if you use everything because a guest spills juice, then we buy more. With what money? Our money. Or mine. But that is the second conversation, because I want complete access to every business account, vendor login, policy, and inventory record by Monday. You already have access. I have access to folders you built. I do not know which decisions still require your login. That is because you never cared about the administrative side. I cared. I trusted you. He pushed his chair back. So now trust is evidence against me? No. Trust is why I did not notice that our systems only work when I agree with you. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, Celia and her sister crossed the street carrying 2 paper bags and laughing in the wind. Graham watched them. I kept this place alive, he said. There it was. Not cruel, not loud, almost wounded. The private ledger opened at last. You helped keep it alive, I said. You did not earn ownership of my judgment. He turned around. After everything I put into this? Yes. After everything. He stared at the brass luggage tag between us. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said, if every system becomes optional when you feel strongly, I cannot be responsible for the outcome. I am not asking you to be responsible for every outcome. That is easy to say because I am the one who fixes things. And I am the one who lives inside the rules you make while fixing them. He picked up the cabinet key from his ring and placed it on the table. The gesture should have felt like victory. It did not. It felt like proof that he still thought the key was his to surrender. I need you to stay somewhere else for a week, I said. His face went blank. You are asking me to leave over bedding. I am asking for space because you used silence to punish disagreement, because you invoked your money to challenge my right to decide in my own home, and because you still call all of that bedding. He slept at a coworker's house. On Monday, he sent me the account list. It was complete, as far as I could tell. There was no stolen money, no secret debt, no dramatic betrayal waiting behind a password. Part of me had expected one because dramatic evidence would have made my choice easier to explain. Instead, I found something quieter. Every system named him as primary. Vendor calls routed to his phone. Maintenance approvals went to his email. The generator contract listed him as sole contact. The linen supplier account allowed only his login to change quantities. None of it was criminal. Most of it was efficient. Together, it formed a life in which my access depended on his willingness to translate. I spent the week changing that. I added my number. I created shared credentials. I called the supplier and asked how often sealed cotton should be inspected and rotated. I opened the West cabinet. The oldest bundles had been sitting there for almost 3 years. 2 showed faint yellowing along the folds. 1 package smelled musty despite the dehumidifier. A bath mat had a brittle rubber backing that cracked when bent. The supplies had not remained perfect because Graham protected them from use. Some had deteriorated because protection had become their only purpose. I thought about how much that resembled us. A marriage cannot be preserved by refusing to spend trust. On Thursday, I moved every bundle into the laundry room. I made a simple rotation chart. Oldest into rooms, freshly cleaned sets into reserve. No locked door. No sole key. Then I placed the cheap beige sheets in the West cabinet by themselves. Not as a joke. As a reminder. Graham returned Friday evening. He stood in front of the empty cabinet for a long time. You dismantled it. I changed it. Without me. Yes. He looked toward the office, where the key now hung on an open hook beside duplicates for every room. Is this what independence looks like to you? He asked. The question hurt, because I knew the answer he wanted. He wanted independence to look like the confidence he had taught me, used only in ways that confirmed his wisdom. Instead, it looked like disappointing him without collapsing. It looks like being able to disagree with you and still belong in my own life, I said. We did not solve our marriage that night. Real boundaries do not create instant understanding. Sometimes they only reveal how much understanding was conditional. Graham agreed to counseling, then spent the first session explaining inventory management. The counselor listened and asked him one question. What did you believe would happen if she opened the cabinet after you said no? He answered immediately. The system would stop meaning anything. The counselor waited. Graham looked at me. For the first time, I think he heard his own sentence without the protection of procedure. Not the linens would run out. Not the inn would fail. Not guests would suffer. The system would stop meaning anything. His authority was the thing under threat. We are still deciding whether the marriage can become something neither of us has to supervise. I will not pretend that one clear conversation repaired years of habits. Graham has apologized for withdrawing and for using his financial contribution as leverage. He has also asked, more than once, whether I now dismiss everything good he did. I do not. That is the hardest part to explain. He did help me. He did stand beside me when I could barely speak. He did show me that fear was not proof of incapacity. And then he became frightened when I used that lesson with him. Both things are true. I no longer believe I must erase the good to justify protecting myself from the harm. Marigold House is open this weekend. Room 4 has the oldest serviceable sheets from the former emergency cabinet. They washed beautifully. Celia wrote after her stay to ask where I bought the blackberry jam, and I sent her Aunt Ruth's recipe. The brass cabinet key now hangs in the kitchen on a hook anyone can reach. Sometimes I catch myself looking at it. Not because I need the linens, because it reminds me that a locked door does not become loving just because the person holding the key once helped you stand. And an emergency is not only the disaster someone prepared to control. Sometimes it is the quiet moment you realize you have been asking permission to meet a need that was yours to name all along.
Thank you for watching. If this story pulled you in, do me one favor. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so the next one finds you the moment it drops. Remember, nothing is ever just what it seems. See you on the next one.